We look at everything as a system change process. So we start everything with awareness. You start with awareness. You understand like what's happening here. And you have to, in that awareness phase, and I think this is really true for leaders coming into an organization or you're starting, like, what am I not seeing? What am I paying attention to? What am I not paying attention to? What might be my blind spot? What am I not seeing that I need to see? Who can I ask? And when I listen, can I actually listen without judgment? Can I listen to say, oh, interesting. Tell me more about that. Tell me more. Then from awareness, once you have a pretty good sense of the system, you move into what we call alignment. And alignment is about helping everybody else see the system.
Do you consider yourself a good listener? If you're listening to a podcast, that's probably a good start, definitely a good sign. But it's one of those underappreciated skills in leadership, the workplace, life generally. And my guest today is, among other things, a communication expert, has some really useful insights and thoughts and approaches to listening to share. She also had a previous career in the advertising industry as well. Her name is Phyllis Dealy, and we'll be talking all things from Mad Men to leadership, from systems thinking to listening and everything in between. It's a great conversation, plenty of quite intriguing tangents as well. Just a generally good chat about some very relevant topics for any leader in the modern world. So stick around and feel free to leave a comment or a rating as well. Let me know what you think.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Phyllis, welcome to Leading with Integrity. It's great to have you on the show. Looking forward to chatting with you today.
Yeah, me too. Thank you, David. It's so nice to be here today, and I'm looking forward to it too.
Tell us a bit about yourself, your career so far, what you do today, why you do it, and so on.
Yes, great. So I'm the founder and CEO of Reinvent the World, and also another communications consulting company called Studio Reinvent. At Reinvent the World, we do business strategy, brand strategy, creative strategy for clients. Really have worked with everybody from IBM to PepsiCo to Susan G. Komen to lots of other nonprofits. So we really have a pretty broad spectrum of clients. But they're all sort of, most of them in our cases are undergoing some kind of transformation, and we help them manage that. And then my career up until then, I've really spent most of my career in advertising, marketing, and branding. So I've been in that field for about 30 plus years. And I really love telling stories. And again, like I think using storytelling and systems thinking to, again, help people kind of manage that transformation. Right? People want to undergo a big change, want to shift something, and they often try to take a very mechanical view of like, oh, if we just fix this piece or this piece or this piece, the whole thing is going to work. And so what we do at Reinvent the World and at Studio Reinvent is we bring a broader perspective to them and help them see the whole system so that they can actually shift the parts that need to be shifted in order to get to the outcomes that they want. And so that's me in a nutshell. And I live here in New York. I'm the mother of 4 boys. That also takes a lot of system thinking and awareness.
I can imagine. So whenever I meet anyone who spent any time in the advertising world, especially if they're from your part of the world, I have to ask, like, did Mad Men get it right? Or is it just, that's just how it is on TV? What's it really like to work in that industry?
Okay. I loved Mad Men. It was so great. And and Mad Men happened it happened right at the point where I was getting pretty burned out on advertising. You know, I had lost the joy of advertising. I had lost some of the, just really what makes advertising fun, which is working with really creative ideas and doing these great big ideas and bringing them to life. And so Mad Men, I think it did get a lot of it right in the earlier days. I sort of started my career at the very tail end of what I would call the Mad Men era. By the early 90s, that whole culture was starting to kind of peter out, right? And it was the emergence of the internet and digital advertising and all of that. So it got a lot less fun in terms of the Mad Men stuff. I caught the very, very tail end of the party part of that. But Mad Men really, it re-inspired me because it was about creative ideas and ambition and bringing that to life. And to see Don Draper in, of course, scripted, but in these rooms, connecting with those clients and lighting them up and helping them see what's possible for their brand. I think they got that 100% right, because when you have a meeting and you see the lights go on, there's just nothing like that in the world. To sell in a great creative idea is a thrill that I will continue to have.
Fair enough. Yeah, thank you. So that was a bit of an off-the-cuff question, but yeah, I'm always curious.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that must have been a really interesting time then to be doing that work as well. I mean, as the internet went from sort of this weird idea that some people were playing with to like, that's how the world runs now. I mean, what was that sort of transition like?
Well, it's like starting a career that you think is one thing and then actually undergoing about 4 or 5 different pretty significant transformations. So, and I can sort of like lay that out for you just really quickly. When I started, it was all about big TV advertising, radio advertising, print advertising. I worked on the Sony account. We were millions and millions of dollars in these big mass media campaigns. And then the internet happened. And then suddenly everyone's like, what is this thing? Do we have to pay attention to it? And that started to create this whole other amount of noise, and people were looking in different places. They weren't all looking at mass media, right? So the internet happened, then blogging happened. Then about 2007, with the introduction of the iPhone and Twitter, the whole industry got disintermediated, right? Suddenly I could pick up my phone and create a commercial. I could create content. And when that happened, it really opened the floodgates. Then you had, of course, social media happened right after Twitter, right? Twitter, Facebook, Instagram completely transformed the way that we communicated. And then soon after that, we got into what's called programmatic, more digital search, all of that stuff. Like data became a really big part of advertising in a way that it never had been before. So imagine you're Mad Men and he's talking about how many impressions in the data and it would not have been as good of television because, that stuff just gets really wonky. And if you love it, you love it and it's critical. But I think, now we're in this next age, right? So disintermediation again with all of the AI tools. I can go to ChatGPT and I can put in, hey, this is what I want the brand to say. And ChatGPT will spit out a manifesto for me. It will spit out a brand strategy. So I think what's been amazing, one of the things that's helped me being in that industry is I've had to learn how to be very agile. I've had to flex and pivot and really stay on top of the media in a way that I think many other industries maybe didn't have to do as much as I did. So I'm grateful for all of the change, but it was a roller coaster for sure.
It feels like there's a sequel there for Mad Men that needs to be made.
Yeah.
But,
Mad Men, the AI edition. Yeah, maybe that could be. Yeah.
Definitely. And secondly, I mean, speaking from a place of not much knowledge about this world and how you get that sort of stuff right, and certainly I don't consider myself that creative in at least in that kind of area. It feels like the more widespread and the easier it gets to access these sort of things. So whether that's from the internet or social media or whatever it might be, the more important it is to have that creative aspect and somebody who knows how to leverage the right strategy and do it properly, if you know what I mean. I mean, what do you think about that?
What do I think? I think what I would do is to do it properly. Yes, I think there are better ways to do it and not so good ways. But the truth is, when you're doing that kind of creative work and you're staying on top of the new technologies, really what you're doing is experimentation. And you can't be afraid to get it wrong. Just as much as you want to get it right, you got to be okay putting yourself out there. You got to try stuff. You're like, I don't know, is this going to work or not? Let's try this. Let's try this. And you do those in small moves, right? So you're not like taking your entire budget and blowing it on an idea or an experiment. You're testing and you're just watching. Oh, that's interesting. Let's put more money there. Oh, let's do more of those kinds of posts. So it really is an evolution. It's way different from the way that it was at the beginning of my career, where you spent a year developing a campaign, millions of dollars shooting that campaign. And then you put it on TV and you're like, fingers crossed, I hope that's going to actually do what we want it to do. Now, you still see people spending big money in the Super Bowl. I can't remember. I don't know what the cost of a Super Bowl ad is. I think I heard it was about $8 million for a 30-second or a minute. Yeah, it's a lot. So if you're a big company, you can make those kind of big moves. But even when you're making big moves, you have to really experiment. You can see some of the brands that were in the Super Bowl took some really big swings, because when you're thinking about landing information with people, it's got to be new. It's got to get their attention. You got to use humor. You've got to sort of take some risks. So I think, for startups, for smaller companies, it's more about small moves and getting comfortable with, hey, that worked, that didn't work. Nobody's fault. We just learned from it. And now let's figure out what's next.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to spend 8 million on something, I guess you've got to be pretty confident you'll at least double that, right?
Yeah, I think so.
It's a mad amount of money, especially for 30 seconds.
Right?
No, thank you.
No, not well. That's not my budget. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's interesting though. So, I mean, let's talk a bit more then about systems awareness. I mean, you described it, I think, as a game changer for leaders, for organizations. Like, why is that?
Yeah.
And I mean, can you define it as well? Like, what do you mean by it? How does it work? All of that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So, systems. So I first got introduced to systems thinking and systems awareness about 10 years ago. And it was a game changer for me, because it shifts the way that you're looking at the world. And we use the language of systems, right? You think weather systems, operating systems, traffic systems. We have all of this language, but when we think of business systems, we often think of like the hardware, the sort of tangible stuff. But in fact, every business is a system. It's an organization. It's an organism, right? Organization, same as organism, meaning that there are all of these different parts that are working together in order to produce an outcome. And you have different departments. That's one element of the system of your business. You have your brand system, which is your name, your logo, how people think about you. You have your values system. You have you might have different assets. All of this stuff sort of comes together. So when you start to see a business and business strategy as an interconnected system, you then understand that you can't just change one thing and expect that's going to be a silver bullet for shifting the entire system. So sometimes what will happen is that, the thing that I see most often is maybe you have the wrong person in the wrong seat. Maybe they are. Or maybe they're the right person in the right seat, but there's some other part of the system that is impacting their ability to get their job done. So if you're the CEO, you're like, we're going to, get rid of Jane, because once we get rid of Jane in the CMO spot, and you see this in CMOs across all companies, right? This is why they have such a short tenure. I think it's like down to 18 months or something. You think, they're just not the right person. We're just going to get a new person. Or this happens in advertising agencies. It's just not the right advertising agency. Let's just get a new agency. That's going to be the answer. But that's not typically the answer, because you're going to keep having the same issues, because you're missing some other connected part of that system that is going to inform and is going to support or be an obstacle to what you want to achieve. So this idea of systems awareness is a game changer, because it takes the lens from you go from here to here. You also understand that the system is complex. You understand that you can't control all the parts of the system. There's some things you can control, some things you can't. And what it does is it just creates a little bit of a pause and a breath and some space to really look at, what's happening here? And I can give you one really good example. I was working with a nonprofit they had a program, and the program wasn't doing well, right? It was a fundraising program, and it had been around a long time. And we mapped out the system. We said, what's happening here? What's going on? We actually put a bunch of paper on the wall, and we drew the system. We said, okay, here are the participants, and here's the organization, and here's the media partners, and here's all the stuff, what's happening. And what we found when we drew that system out is that we found that the organization was way out here, away from the actual event. The event had been siloed, and the people in the organization were not actually actively taking part in the event. So what it meant was that in that system, they didn't really understand what was happening. And so one of the ways that we shifted that system is we said, we got to bring these two things together, this event that you're doing, and we got to get the people at the organization into the event and experiencing the event. And that's going to actually infuse some energy into this system in a way that if you just keep them separate and keep expecting this to do well without actually having some ownership and some involvement in it, and that seems really simple, but it was kind of a game changer, aha, for them. They're like, okay, great. Like, we're getting more people to the event. And, now we're like 5 or 6 years into that, and it has made a big difference.
Yeah, interesting. So, I mean, you used the CMO as your example. And it makes me think of maybe there's a parallel in leadership. And I've heard this story a few times now about the way CEOs, when they're replaced, they bring someone new in. We need new leadership. It's exactly the kind of thing you were just talking about, isn't it? Like, not understanding the problem, not seeing it in terms of the whole ecosystem or whichever phrase you like. And then that new CEO, what do they normally do? Invariably, because they're under pressure to achieve a change, so they have to make a change, and they do it immediately without taking that time first to understand, take that pause. Like, you've just arrived. Like, understand what's going on first before you start breaking more things.
Yeah, well, and that's what we're taught. Leaders lead. Leaders don't listen. Leaders lead. So we lead, and we lead with action. And one of the things that we do at reInvent, we have a 4-step process, and we always start every single sort of, we look at everything as a system change process. So we start everything with awareness. You start with awareness. You understand, like, what's happening here. And you have to, in that awareness phase, and I think this is really true for leaders coming into an organization, or you're starting, like, what am I not seeing? What am I paying attention to? What am I not paying attention to? What might be my blind spot? What am I not seeing that I need to see? Who can I ask? And when I listen, can I actually listen without judgment? Can I listen to say, oh, interesting. Tell me more about that. Tell me more. Then from awareness, once you have a pretty good sense of the system, you move into what we call alignment. And alignment is about helping everybody else see the system. And then deciding, if this is the system that we're in right now, what do we want to shift to? If we think about our best possible future, what is that? And then how does the system have to shift to make that happen? Once you have that, and that's the strategy planning part, that alignment piece, then you can move into action. Okay, new brand, new CHRO, new this, new operating system, new whatever it is that we need to make that vision happen. And then the last phase is really important too, because you can't just get in there and start doing a bunch of stuff. The last phase is accountability. So how are we going to actually track that we did what we said we were going to do? Who's responsible for that? And what's the feedback mechanism that will allow us to continue to evolve? Because when you think about systems awareness, this feedback piece is absolutely critical. You don't just change it and then let it run. You're like, okay, interesting. Again, remember I said experimentation. What's happening? What did I learn? How am I going to shift that again? Did it work? Maybe it didn't work. We got to go back to alignment and rethink about our plan. And so if you sort of follow those 4 steps, you can get to a place where you can create change in a way that is responsible and I think much more effective. And also, by the way, also feels a lot better, which is important as a leader, that your organization, you have some care with the way that you're enacting change.
Yeah, I mean, what's really interesting about that answer actually is where you started about, with leaders, we don't listen, we act, and that's the way we're taught. And then everything you said after that was the complete opposite of that.
Was
starting
what?
position was totally the opposite of that, which is the right way it should be. So, I mean, that 4-step process you've just described there, to me, I mean, that's leadership in most circumstances, isn't it? It's got to start
Yeah.
with that listening piece. It's got to end with that feedback as well. And it's got to
Yeah.
also, really important part in there that you've also mentioned is that kind of iterative approach, which is part of being an agile leader, I suppose, isn't it? But
Yeah.
it's surprising to me even now, like how many times as leaders we get this one idea stuck in our head, and we're like, well, that's the way we're going to do this, and it doesn't matter what happens after that point of decision. We stick to our guns, and we know this is what I'm leading us to do. We're doing this thing. But you need to
Yeah.
have that flexibility. Like if circumstances change, you learn new things, you realize it's not working, you've got to be able to go back through the beginning of that cycle, I suppose.
Yes. And I want to recognize, like, sometimes you bring a leader in and you're in a crisis situation. And that's a little different because then you do have to lead right away to stabilize, right? If you're in a crisis situation, you have to stabilize. But I always say, like, less is more. Like, what's the minimum that you can do to create a stable enough environment to address the immediate concern? And then you take the pause. But so it's, and you also, also recognizing you have board members and you have investors who are like, where are the sales? I want to see sales in 3 months. Part of that, again, is having confidence as a leader to say, I understand that you want this. If I could do that, I would do that. But guess what? Here's what it's going to actually take. You're going to get more respect and credibility out of being realistic and pushing back and having confidence about your leadership than just always being reactive to the voices in the room.
Absolutely. I guess it depends on the crisis, doesn't it? And the nature of that and the causes behind it. But I think, I don't disagree with you, but I do think there's always still room for that. Listen to what the people involved have to say. And that doesn't always come naturally if you're the leader in that situation, because you want to fix the problem. You feel like that's why you're there. That's your role in this. And that makes it really difficult sometimes to just ask people, like, what do you think's gone wrong here? What's the solution from your point of view? Like,
yeah, and the other thing that's at play, and you can't not factor this in, is the physiology and the psychology of being in a crisis situation, which will put you and the organization into a fight or flight mode, right? So physiologically, you've gone from using your full brain to just your reptilian brain. You focused, and you can't make good leadership decisions with that kind of a lens. And so that's why, to your point, the pausing allows you to kind of clear some of that chemistry out, so you can actually see the bigger picture and the bigger system.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, to add another wrinkle to that, I don't know, have you heard this? So there's fight and flight, which I think we've all heard of. We've all been taught that probably since we were kids. Apparently there's a third one as well, which is freeze.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'd only recently, like the last couple of years, heard of this. And then, so in that situation you've just described there, I mean, I can see myself in that situation. I would go the freeze route. I would tell myself, well, I need to take a pause and make sure I understand before I start messing with anything. But I can so see that turning into just frozen indecision, inaction. I mean, what do you do in that situation? Like,
I don't know. I have to tell you, that is one of my recurring dreams, is that I'm in the situation and I cannot move. You're trying, the one where you're trying to speak, but you can't scream. That sort of, I think, encapsulates that feeling of freeze. What do you do? Well, eventually you will unfreeze. And the thing that will save you is the awareness that you're frozen, the awareness that you're in fight or flight. So, we talk a lot about this awareness factor, which is about systems thinking, but it's also just like that moment of presence where you're like, okay, I'm in crisis. I'm recognizing. You sort of, if you've ever done any meditation and you're trying to calm those thoughts, in this case, like, that thought can be like, I'm frozen, or I'm in a fear mode, or I'm in whatever. And the truth is that's the key, because as soon as you have that thought and you realize that what you're experiencing isn't real, that it's in your head. And I'm not saying the crisis isn't real, but your response to it is in your head. And as soon as you know that, then you can exhale. And then you can decide how you want to move. You can move forward. And you can like, and I call it clearing the chemistry. You can do that in 4 breaths. Just sort of the inhale, the exhale, inhale, get up, walk away from your computer. A mentor of mine once said, if you feel compelled to do something, don't. And I love that, because it means if you feel compelled to do something, you're in that fight or flight brain or freeze brain, meaning you're like, this, I have to do this. You have a story. It's a negative story. The truth is you just got triggered into fight or flight. So you have to take that moment to pause and look at the situation again.
Well, fair enough. And apologies, I didn't mean to dredge up any triggering dreams or anything.
No, I love my dreams, even the bad ones. They're always informative. So
yes, yeah, I agree. You learn something about yourself, don't you, and your subconscious. Yes. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've talked about the L word, haven't we, about listening, which kind of leads us into communication, which I would assume has been a pretty big part of your career journey so far. I mean, that's the central theme in most of those things that you've done, isn't it? So in your experience then, what do you think is the core, the heart of really great communication?
I think the core of really great communication is, there's so many things that I could answer, to be honest. I really do think listening is the lever, is the thing that helps make you a great communicator. And it doesn't, it's maybe not obvious, because you're like, well, you're not communicating, you're listening. But if you think about communication, the science of communication, and what's really happening, right? Understanding what's happening helps make you a better communicator. And understanding that listening is the reciprocal side of communicating, again, helps make you a really great communicator. So right now, I'm speaking and I am encoding. I'm encoding a bunch of words, stories, experiences, and I'm sending them across all the way across across the Atlantic to you, and you are decoding. You're decoding everything that I say, and you're putting that through. Everything I say is going through a lens of your own experiences, maybe the other guests you've had on your podcast and what they've said. Maybe you had a bad dream last night about listening. I don't know. And you're taking all that in and you're creating meaning, and then you're asking me a question, and then I'm the decoder, right? So we just go back and forth like this. But listening, that ability to truly be present, and I think of listening as a state of being. I don't actually like the term active listening, because active listening to me feels a little bit like acting, like, oh, okay, yeah. You were taught like, yes, head nod. I can be head nodding.
Yeah.
I can be head nodding with you right now and be thinking about, am I going to have curry tonight or pizza? Yeah. Right. So listening is a state of being. It's a receptive activity, meaning you're not you're just taking it in. And once you understand that, and you're not always just trying to figure out what you're going to say next, and you can really be a great listener, that shifts your ability to communicate. People want to tell you more. It's a quality that you give off when you're a great listener, which makes you a great communicator.
Yes. Yeah. I agree with you about active listening. Like, I know what people mean when they're trying to say it. For me, I think what makes more sense is it's that idea of presence, really, isn't it? And I don't mean in terms of like projecting your personality, but like being present in the conversation, actually forcing yourself to listen, closing all the other windows, putting your phone on silent, whatever it is that you need to do. And it's always been a question, especially from a leadership angle as well. For me, it's always been a question of respect, and respecting the other person's time and their inputs, their thoughts, their opinions, and all of that. And I think, everyone in the audience, I'm sure, has worked for a leader who's terrible at that. They're sitting there with a BlackBerry, sending an email with their thumbs. They're not really listening to you, and that sort of thing.
I have to tell you, I remember when there were BlackBerries, and I remember the very first meeting. I was working with a partner, and she was like this. the whole time. And you want to talk about getting triggered. For me, as someone who is always so focused on the client experience and being a good client service person and listening and taking that, to watch her do that, it completely took me out of being a listener, because I was so, it is a question of respect. And
Yeah.
you know what? All we have in our lives are these moments where we get to connect with each other. We get to connect with nature. We get to connect with a moment of being alone or reflective. And if you're distracted and you're not allowing yourself the presence to have that connection, you're kind of, to me, you're kind of missing out on life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's certainly one way of looking at it. I don't disagree with you. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's a generational thing. Maybe we're showing our age. But for me, like, that was I've always considered that rude.
Always.
But then I've also done it on occasion, like with family around the dinner table and things, and you get called out on it, and you're like, oh.
Yeah. Well, I have too. I don't want to be a complete hypocrite here, but yes, we all have done it. But I think in part we've done it because it's become a social norm, and people don't see it as rude anymore. And for me,
this is it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
we adapt.
with the how many generations are there now in the workforce? 4 or 5? I've lost count, but there's quite a few. And I think for people like us who've had that certain perception as we've grown up and been in the workplace at various stages, and then what we consider rude or disrespectful or not the way of doing things, we've got to adjust that thinking, I think, because it's perfectly normal probably to people much younger than us.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think I would struggle with that if I was leading people actively today. I think that would be a real challenge for me.
Yeah. I mean, my entire team is trained on all of this idea of being present. And so so it has not been, I think part of it is about who you choose to bring on your team. And, if the fit is right, and if they're receptive to that kind of working in that way, like, it has not been as much of a challenge for me. I mean, but I know pretty quickly if it's not going to be a good fit.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's the best way to go, isn't it? Yeah. So let's talk more about listening. You have 4 levels of listening, I believe. So what are they, and why do they matter?
Well, okay. So the 4 levels of listening, it really comes out of the Presencing Institute. And this is when I first learned systems awareness, I learned about these 4 levels of listening. So that I've sort of adapted and modified them slightly to address kind of my client work. But let me take you through each one. And again, this is that level of awareness. Once you have awareness about the different levels, it's a game changer. So the first level of listening is called downloading. And I want to say this, all 4 levels, one is not bad. The others are good. These are just 4 levels. Okay. So, and they all sort of have their purpose. So level 1 is called downloading. Downloading is about finding common ground. And in many ways, you're confirming what you already know. So imagine that you're in a silo, one of those big grain silos, if you see on a farm, right? You're in the silo and there's no windows and you're just in the middle, and all the data from the world is coming in and you're processing it. You're decoding it in your brain. And what you're saying is like, yep, that's what I thought. That's my worldview. That just confirmed what I already believed to be true. And yes. And you're not really going any deeper than that. You're sort of quickly processing, discarding, confirming what you know. Now, where level 1 listening comes in handy is when you're looking for small talk or you want to create a connection. So we might say, oh, you have a dog, I have a dog. Wow, what kind of dog do you have? Like, suddenly we're creating that human connection. So downloading can be important for that, right? To create some sort of cursory level of connection. The next level of listening, again, imagine you're in your silo, that big grain, and you're in the middle, information's coming in, but you have a window and you can look outside of your worldview and some piece of information comes in and you're disconfirming, right? It doesn't actually add up to what you think. It doesn't align with your bias, whatever you think is true. So you notice that, like, oh, wait, that's interesting, but you know what? I'm still right. I'm right. And I'm going to tell you, David, why I'm right. And typically, if you're an expert, a consultant, if you're a doctor, a scientist, a lawyer, people who are just really grounded in their expertise, information comes in, you're like, well, let me tell you, 30 years, I can tell you why that's not a good decision for your brand. You're wrong. I'm right. So level 2 listening gets into debate. You're talking tough, right? And you're trying to convince the other person. Level 3 listening is called reflective listening. And for me, in the work that we do with clients, when we get into collaboration and creativity and building something together and that awareness phase, reflective listening is all about you're in your silo, but there's a door and you can walk out and you see a piece of information comes in that you might disagree with, but rather than saying, oh, you know what, let me convince you I'm right, my worldview's right, you say, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. Why do you think that? I don't agree. I don't agree with you. That's not what my expertise is telling, but I want to know more about why you think that's important. And when you do that, you're getting to a deeper level of listening, and it's not fake. Like, oh, fine, tell me more. What is it? It's really, you really want to know. You get really, really curious, and what happens is that it can unlock some piece of information that you had a blind spot about, that you didn't know, that you couldn't see. And I'm going to talk about how to work between the levels. And after I tell you the fourth level is really interesting. There's no silo. There's no little dot inside there's no ego inside that. You and I are having a conversation. We're just co-creating. I'm like, yeah, David, what about this? And you're like, yes. And I think we could do that. And then this, and then this. So you're not worried about whose idea it is. You're not worried about where it's going. You're really tapping into that field of possibility. That level of listening is, imagine the best brainstorming session you've ever been in, right? Where the ideas are just flowing. And so once you understand these 4 levels, am I just confirming what I already think I know? Am I disconfirming and trying to debate? That's level 2. Am I actually getting curious? Am I listening? Like, tell me more. What's happening? I want to understand that. And have I moved myself all the way down to this level where it's really about tapping into that co-creation? That's like flow, right? If you've heard the term flow, that's really what happens at level 4. And often you'll run into people who are stuck at level 2. And you're like, she just doesn't get it. She's never going to get it. This is, it doesn't matter what I say. Well, the trick, if you've got somebody stuck at level 2, go back up to level 1. Find something that you can agree on. And so I might say, look, David, I know we don't agree on the strategy for how we want to get this thing done that we need to get done. But we can both agree that we got to figure this out in the next week. And you're like, yeah, absolutely. We have to figure this out. What's funny about that is once you're agreeing, you can sort of slide right down into level 3. It just opens it up. You're taking the ego out of it. So I like to use that sort of up to go back down. And, the other thing is patience. If you got somebody in level 2, just keep saying, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. And eventually you'll get to that place where you can connect on with a real dialogue and a real sort of, listening exchange. So those are the 4 levels of listening. And, if you want to sell anything and you're just hitting the door on level 1 and level 2, you're not going to sell anything in level 1 or level 2. Not going to happen. It's just not happening. You're not going to sell anything until you get down to that 3rd and 4th level.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. And yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And it's ringing bells for me as well. I mean, particularly the level 3 side of it. I can see how that aligns to like the scientific method and things like this as well. And I've often complained with friends over a few beers or two about the dying art of critical thought and proper conversations. And I feel like this is perhaps one of the ways of solving that is understanding those different ways that we might be listening depending on our mindset at the time, or a particular bias, or sometimes even like what it is that's being discussed. I mean, politics is the big one that we try not to stray into too much, but there's definitely some lessons there, aren't there?
Yeah, wow. Yeah, it's yeah, there's some topics that are hard to, but you
Yeah.
can navigate pretty much anything, I think, as long as you don't get stuck up in level 2, and you just get curious about it. Listen, I might vehemently disagree, but I can still, goes back to what you said, respect. I can also respect you enough to allow you to share your opinion and your point of view. And just because I don't like your point of view doesn't mean I can't like you. We commingle that. We make people about their points of view. And then when we don't like points of view, then we don't like those people. And that's not useful, because to me, it's a waste of energy. We're putting our energy in all the wrong places.
I agree. Yeah. And that's quite, yeah. I say this from a place of ignorance and not having really researched it very well, but I feel like that's quite a modern phenomenon. Because, like, I don't know, maybe that's coming from more of a hope place. Like, I hope it's a modern phenomenon, because otherwise, like, humanity wouldn't have survived this long, surely.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, it can't always have been that way, but I don't know.
It would be interesting to research. I'm still sort of amazed when I watch some of these documentaries about, the 60s or the 70s, or even back in the 20s or the 1800s, like the things that were happening and the stories that people were telling and the vitriol that people had for each other. Like, I don't know if it's a modern phenomenon, but I think what's true is that it's way more visible and it's way louder today than it was back then. And that makes it feel like it's more, it's bigger, right? Because before they were just writing nasty letters to each other. Nobody saw it except for the two of them.
Yeah, this is it. Like, I guess it's the other side of the double-edged sword, isn't it? Of things like the internet and social media and just like free, easy access to all information ever. Yeah, it's a tough one. I do feel like it's more widespread than it was, but I don't really have any basis in fact for that. It is literally just a feeling.
I think I'm with you. I think we should be optimistic. Maybe it's a modern phenomenon, something we can solve. Maybe.
Yeah,
we'll figure it out.
I mean, so the bit I think that's more of a modern issue is it's the bit about conflating disagreement with dislike. And because it always used to be, I mean, there's plenty of writings on this going back hundreds of years, really. I mean, there's that really well but misquoted thing about, I might disagree with what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. I mean, that whole mindset doesn't seem to exist anymore. I can't imagine a modern person saying that. Certainly not a modern politician.
The politics, I think.
Yeah.
If there's any place where people could use some communication coaching, it's there. I had this one dream. I said this to my coach. I go, at some point, I would really like to be the communication coach. I'd like to train I'd like to train Congress and the executive branch, like because I think we have sort of lost our way, and at least in the United States, with how we talk to each other, how we respect each other, how we allow those kinds of that dialogue to happen. Going back to the levels of listening, level 2 is a really important level to have disagreement. I was moderating a workshop yesterday, and we started off, and somebody in the workshop at the beginning, we had a whole hour of discussion, and she said some stuff that was tough, but that the group needed to hear. And in doing that, and being vulnerable in that way, and being willing to have a different point of view, it was actually the moment, it was a day and a half workshop. It was the moment in the workshop that was the crack that blew the whole thing open in a good way, where suddenly everyone's like, yes, that's true. And we still want to do this, and we can come together. And so, I think as leaders, we can't be afraid to say the hard thing.
I think it goes deeper than that. I think that's why this is important. It's because you can't get to a really satisfactory, acceptable, quality agreement or outcome if you haven't had any disagreement along the way. It is important to disagree because it makes everyone, even if they don't ever like come to that point of view, they've at least thought about a different point of view. They've thought about, well, what if I am wrong? You know, and that ends up usually meeting in the middle, doesn't it? Which ultimately ends up being the better outcome.
Yeah. And I said to there were 3 of us from my team there, and I was like, okay, so if everybody really agrees the entire time, there's no disagreement, that's a bad outcome. Because we know that just means people aren't saying it. With, 14 people in the room and 70,000 thoughts a day for each person in there, all of those thoughts, there is no way that everybody is that aligned from the beginning. And if everybody totally disagrees and can't get anything, that's also a bad outcome. So you're looking for the middle way. You're looking to navigate both of those sides to get to an outcome that people can actually let go of some of the stuff that they need to let go of in order to come together to build something new.
Definitely. And if you want everyone to get behind it as well, and they've got disagreements that they haven't voiced. Yeah. But also, like, even if it's not because of disagreements that they haven't voiced, what are the odds that everyone agrees first time on the right answer? That 0%. Seems pretty low odds. Yeah.
I'd say 0. I'd say 0%.
Absolutely. Changing subjects again, one of my, and this is a short list that's constantly changing, but currently one of my favorite books on leadership and teamwork it's not a new book. It's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which I'm sure everyone has read. If not, they should. Recommendation there for the listeners. And within that book, I mean, it kind of weaves a story, doesn't it, about a CEO coming in to fix a broken company for various reasons. And one of the ways that she almost immediately starts to do is having offsites for the executive team. Mm-hmm. Which is a controversial thing in a lot of companies, just that offsite, and the results that come from it are often not what was desired, shall we say. Let's put it politely. So why is that, do you think? Why do most of those sort of executive level offsites not really work, or at least not create that sort of change or action that they were intended to do?
Yeah. So why do they not? I mean, I'll tell you what, there's nothing worse than a bad offsite. It's like, there's nothing worse than a bad offsite. I think the first reason a lot of the offsites don't work, and I'm going to, as a facilitator, I think not having an outside facilitator at one of those offsites is the first mistake, because you can't, as somebody inside the system, facilitate those kinds of conversations you can't leave your ego out of it. You can't leave your position out of it. You can't leave your point of view out of it. So if you're going to invest in an offsite, one of the first things that you should think about is bringing in an outside facilitator who can play that role, who can really integrate and make sure that the space is safe, make sure everybody's speaking up, make sure that you've got a program that will allow you to kind of get through that. So that's the first thing. The second thing, sometimes the second component, I'd say, of a good offsite is the space. So facilitator, the space, the place that you're actually having the offsite. I understand that budgets are tight. I understand not everybody can go, have a big conference room overlooking the ocean in Turks and Caicos. But if you're going to invest in the time, you want to make sure that the space that you're trying to create actually reflects the sort of change and the energy that you want to embed with the group, right? So if you're putting everybody around a conference room in a windowless hotel room, your outcome, as good as your facilitator might be, as good as your team might be, is also going to be impacted by that. But let's get to the third reason. I think a lot of these offsites, and really the biggest reason, those are ingredients: a great facilitator, a great space. The other reason that a lot of these offsites are not fulfilling or not sustainable is that they look for if we're going to do a project together, we start to say, okay, what do we want to do? What does, what does John want to do? What does Larry want to do? What does Barbara want to do? And we look for the overlap. And so we start from a place of compromise. If you just do that Venn diagram and you put all three of those, let's say we have 3 people in the offsite, 20. You do the Venn diagram of what everybody wants and everybody thinks. The part that's overlapping is about that big. And so if I'm only getting 5% of what I want in a strategic plan, the question is, how committed am I going to be? I only got 5% of what I want and 95% of what I didn't because my ideas didn't overlap with everybody else. You're not going to be very committed. And so I can get excited, I guess, about it, but I still didn't get the things that I wanted. So when you walk out of that room, you're not committed to making it happen. When we do strategic planning, we actually use a process that comes out of a crazy name. We sort of adapted it from this approach called dragon dreaming. It sounds really like totally weird, but I renamed
Sounds
it
cool.
because I'm a branding person. I renamed it collective ambition, which tends to go a lot better with more corporate type. But the idea here is that you build a dream that's big enough so that David, you can get 100% of what you want. I can get 100% of what I want. Marcy gets 100% of what she wants. Carrie gets 100% of what she wants. And then we create a big dream and we start from this bigger place of possibility. And we let anything go in that dream, anything. We're not trying to prioritize. We're not trying to make it smaller before we do that. We just get to a big dream. Everybody gets 100%. And then everybody gets what they want. Now, as you're building the big dream together, at some point you get so excited about that. And because you let me have 100%, I might say, that thing that I thought was so important, I like this thing better. I don't need that. And so you can start to then you can start to prioritize, but you're prioritizing from a bigger place instead of starting from a place of compromise. And it's that reframe and it's that shift that I think makes a big difference. And the other thing is, once you have that big dream, the other absolutely critical thing to do is to make sure that you understand what are the keys or the levers that are going to unlock that dream. If you can only do 4 things to make that happen, what are the 4 areas or work streams that you've got to get that are going to make that happen? And then give them really fun names. Don't say HR, say shiny, happy people, right? That's the name of that work stream. Don't say, get sales, say, win big, sexy deals. So you give these things an energy and a nomenclature that everybody can share and be excited about. And then you're just tracking that. And we run that through the exact same awareness, alignment, action, accountability. And that ensures that, we're tracking this year over year and we're saying, well, how far do we get? And I think that's what makes for a much more effective offsite.
What I love about that, again, is the involving everyone in it, but actually, what is it you want to get out of this? What's your 100%? What does that look like? Because again, I think another ingredient in the failed ones, the ones that don't turn out the right way, is that the leadership go into it with an assumption or many assumptions about what everyone else is looking to get out of this, or what the best outcome is, or what the answer is even before they've started. So yeah, I really love that process, that combats, I think, that one. It reminds me of some of the terrible ones I've been to as well.
Well, the worst ones. I'm going to tell you the one thing not to do. Okay, so here's how to have the absolute world's worst offsite. 1.
Wait, no.
The worst offsite. Have somebody inside the organization facilitate it. Go to a room that has no windows and you're all sitting around a conference room. And the CEO and the COO and the CFO should come in and just present plans to people for 2 days. World's worst offsite.
I've been to that one.
Me too. It's why I designed the other way, because I don't want to do those anymore.
Actually, my favorite one that I ever went to, they did get a facilitator. And there was me and a friend of mine at the time, a work friend at the time. We're proper friends now, I like to think. he might disagree. Anyway, so we'd arrived pretty early. We were standing around the coffee, sort of, what's going on here? Because we hadn't been told anything. We'd just been told to show up. And this facilitator comes along, and he was obviously pretty good at his job, but he just was not prepared for either us in our mindset at the time or the organisation he was dealing with. And he walked up and just asked some like really innocuous question about, are you looking forward to digging into something or other, or so are you guys happy with what we're here to achieve today? And we both just sort of looked at him and went, well, what are we here to achieve today? We've not been told. It was just that deer in the headlights moment. I felt so sorry for the guy, but he did an okay job afterwards, bless him. But
that's a hard start. That would be a hard start. Yeah. The other way to make sure you don't have a good offsite is don't prepare.
Yeah.
Just show up. Yeah. To your point.
Don't tell anyone what it's about. And
don't tell anyone what it's about. Yeah.
Oh dear. You've got to laugh in hindsight though. You really do.
You have to. And you know what? And the reason that, that's how you learn. You're like, I'm not doing that again.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it was, if I'm ever running one of these, I won't do that.
Exactly.
Anyway, right. So, I mean, we better talk a bit more about leadership, hadn't we? Because we're going to run out of time soon.
Yeah.
The one I'm really interested to hear the answer from everyone I speak to actually is, what's been your best experience of being led?
It's hard for me because I've been an entrepreneur and working for myself for almost 25 years. And I think the best experience of being led, I'm going to go all the way back to my time at Leo Burnett in my very first job. And it was a tough business. It was a little of the Mad Men kind of thing. It was tough. You don't want to make mistakes back then. But I had a leader who, in that tough business, he managed to make things light. He managed to create space for me as a new media buyer planner at the time. That's what my role was, to make mistakes. And I knew that I wasn't going to get fired. I knew that he created that trust that I could come to him, that I could ask questions that were maybe stupid questions at the time, right? No, everybody wants to really appear really smart, right? So you don't want to ask stupid questions. But he created the space, and he had a lightness in the way that he led, where we laughed a lot as a team. The stakes were high, but the consequences were low. So that even though we were building media plans for millions of dollars, right? And print and insertion, and as a 23-year-old, 24-year-old at that time in my career, that's sort of a scary thing. It's like, I'm signing for a $1 million, blah, 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 right? Like you want to get it right. But so I like this, the stakes were high, but the consequences were low. We had a place where we could make mistakes because that was really the only way we were going to learn. And I always remember the quality of his leadership. And it's so funny because I hadn't really thought about him until now, but I think that was it made a big impact on me in the way that I wanted to lead. That lightness of being, I think, is really important as a leader, so that, you're creating space for people to learn.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's got to be the goal, I think, or one of the most important goals anyway for any leader. It's it's interesting to hear that it's one of the earliest leaders in your career as well, because I had very similar, like, probably if I was answering that question, it would be pretty much the first leader I encountered in the workplace. And I don't know if you found this, but all the ones I had after that didn't really measure up. And maybe that was a subconscious reason why I didn't get on with them as well.
Yeah, maybe.
Because I was like, you're not as good, are you? So
you're not as good. I think he was one of the best. I'd have to go a little bit deeper. Also, he was a great role model, and he set the bar for me.
Yeah. Which I guess is a definition of leadership, isn't it? One of the many, but
yes.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, thank you for sharing that story. Difficult question for you now. If you could start your career over again, would you do anything differently?
Would I do anything differently? Well, besides you mean being a country music singer, which I think is what I probably should know. What I would do, I think if I could start my career again, I don't know that I would do anything differently in terms of the path that I took. Because in a weird way, the path that I took, which at the time looked disastrous, right? I quit my job at Leo Burnett. I went to Denver. I worked at a film production company, which became an internet company. Then I moved to New York with that internet company. Then I did more film. Like it was this very weird thing. And my friends were like, "You're ruining your resume," right? And I was like, "Yeah, I know, but it just feels like this is the right thing to do." And it turned into the right thing to do because I had all of these different experiences, and it was that sort of generalist thing that makes me, I think, really good as a facilitator and as a leader and a strategist. But the biggest thing that I would do would be I would have more confidence in myself if I could, right? I was pretty tentative early in my career, and I'm naturally an introvert. The social interaction stuff and like speaking up felt really hard to me early on because I didn't have that confidence that, I was enough. I had enough value. I was bringing enough value. There was a right way to do things, and there was a wrong way. And I was always worried I was going to be in the wrong. And, the thing that really opened that up for me is I did improvisational theater. I took classes and then I ended up performing. And that was kind of the tipping point for me that helped me say, oh, we're just up here. We're creating. Doesn't matter. I'm going to say something, then you're going to say something. I'm going to say something else. Like that really freed me up. But I think I wish I would have been a little bit more confident in my ability to contribute earlier on.
It's a good answer. Yeah. And I think I say this every time actually, but I do feel like that answer is the one most people would give. Apart from like the really like wildly confident extroverts who've been like that since they were born, those sort of people. We don't begrudge them that, obviously. But
no, we need them. I'm married to one. My partner is one. I love extroverts, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean, though. And that improv thing is interesting. For me, it's been podcasting, funnily enough, and starting my own business, because you have to get confident pretty quickly, otherwise it ain't going to work.
Right.
I think you might have already answered this one. I'm going to ask anyway, just in case. Biggest leadership lesson that you would take from your career so far?
Here's my biggest leadership lesson. It's a very tactical one, and it was very painful. Being clear about expectations, and specifically being clear in the language of what's expected contractually. And, I'm a, as much as I am an introvert, I'm also a human connection person. So I meet you and I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. Like, I feel it. We got the vibe, and like, David's going to be great. And we're going to do this. And then, starting down the path of collaborating without clarity has been a very difficult lesson that, and I'd like to say I made it once, but I've made it multiple times because I get so enthusiastic about people, and it's not just what they're going to provide, it's what they expect me to provide. And I think that, clarity is absolutely critical. Clarity of communication, clarity of contracts, clarity of expectations and timelines, and really managing that and not putting, you can't just assume that you're on the same page. It really helps to write it down. And I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons that, frankly, it's taken me about 6 or 7 or 8, maybe even 10 times to learn. If I'm really, I wasn't a good student on that one, but I am now.
It is a difficult lesson though, especially running your own business or freelancing or whichever, because it's easy to get overexcited, isn't it? Like, it's the idea. And that's what you're there to do. And you just, this is going to be great. And you go for it. Yeah. I get it.
Yeah, I think we've all done it. But I would say to, somebody who's starting a business, don't, get clear. The faster you get clear, the better it's going to be for you and everybody else.
Excellent. Well, I've only got one question left, really. And it's my favorite one. So you've got to answer it. You can't get away with it. It's called Leadership Heroes. Leadership Heroes. So if you had to pick one person, but it could be anyone you can think of, like alive, dead, past, present, real, fictitious, whatever. The only thing is it has to be someone that you think would perfectly embody leadership. So who is that person going to be for you and why?
Yeah. I thought about this. I saw this question. I was like, oh, who am I going to choose? Is it Eleanor Roosevelt? Is it da-da-da? But, the person for me that comes up again and again that embodies leadership and a very specific kind of leadership is James Baldwin. The novelist, the poet, the activist. And what I think is so amazing about his leadership is the complete confidence and fearlessness with which he was able to convey his ideas at a time when those ideas were felt radical and unpopular, and he did it with such composure and confidence. And I just have like a tremendous respect for somebody who's able to lead with that level of authenticity and openness and confidence. So for me, I think I would say James Baldwin.
Great choice. I don't think anyone's chosen him before. I could be wrong. I don't remember him being chosen before, so you might get bonus points as well.
Okay.
Yeah, great choice. And I love the reasoning as well. And
every time he comes, I mean, if you just go to YouTube, pull up a James Baldwin, like an interview, any of the interviews that he did, and you are just mesmerized by the passion and the conviction and the confidence. And I so respect that.
And in a period of history where he had quite a lot of competition in that as well. Feels weird calling it history, doesn't it? But yeah,
it does.
It is now.
Yeah.
Well, Phyllis, it's been lovely meeting you. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I'm going to ask one tiny other little question, which is if anyone wants to learn more about you or the work that you do, is there a website? Is there social links?
Yeah.
Where can they go?
Yeah. Most of my social media I post on LinkedIn, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn. It's just LinkedIn, / Phyllis Dealy. And also my website is reinvent.world for the reinvent side of the business. And it's studioreinvent.com for the communications and consulting and facilitation side of the business.
Lovely. Okay. Well, I'll put all of those links in the show notes down there somewhere.
Great.
So people can find them easily.
David, thank you so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed our conversation as well.
Yeah, me too. And yeah, thanks so much for being here. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.
Phyllis, thank you again for that conversation today. Really enjoyed myself. Hope you did as well. Listener or viewer, I'm sure you enjoyed that conversation too. There's plenty in there to learn and benefit from. If you would like to learn more about Phyllis, do take a look at the links in the episode description. Pay a visit to that website, follow on social media, and so on. And if leadership is something you care about in your career, if you want to be able to lead with integrity, if you want to put your people first, and you want to avoid being that horrible, soul-destroying kind of boss, perhaps the kind of boss you've had yourself in the past, then do come along and join us at Integrity Leaders, the online community for new leaders in a moment of career change or transition. We are there to share experiences of leadership, learn from each other, support each other, and also there's access to plenty of resources, including leadership courses, regular events, articles, blogs, other resources as well, plenty of documents to get stuck into. Not to mention early access to these podcast episodes as well. Get them a week before anyone else. Every leader's journey is different. If you're happy to go it alone, feel free to carry on doing that. You're always, of course, welcome to listen to these episodes. But if you are looking for a more supported and supportive approach to leadership, Integrity Leaders is the place for you. Come and join us now. Website is on the screen, but it's www.leadingwithintegrity.co.uk, and you'll find a big green button which will take you to a sign up page with a video of me explaining more about it and being a little bit silly And if sci-fi is your thing, that's definitely something you don't want to miss. That's all from me. I've been David Hatch, the host of Leading with Integrity. Thank you for being with us today, and I hope you'll join me again next week when we'll be hearing from one of the most enthusiastic authors I've ever encountered, who has loads of great insights into leadership from a long and storied career. His name is Dennis Henson, and he'll be with me next week. Until then, be a leader, not a boss.